Hey YouTube, this is City Prepping. I've done videos in the past about books you should consider for your prepping library. From the past videos, I've gotten a lot of feedback and further recommendations. I also have recently had a number of requests to do another video for those who have newly come to the prepping community because of the coronavirus pandemic. With the events unfolding this year, I think more and more people are becoming aware that having some semblance of being able to take care of yourself if services or our infrastructure are compromised. Food shortages, lack of medical care, and a lack of personal safety, once considered unimaginable, are now possibilities in this uncertain world we are now living in. Apart from having items in your inventory like food, water, medical supplies, knowledge is critical. So with that in mind, here's 10 books you should heavily consider having in your library that have important information. If at any time you want to pick up any of these books we'll be just discussing, I'll post links in the description section and in the comments section below. So let's go ahead and jump in. Book 1, The Survival Medicine Handbook. With hospitals fully dedicated to the fight against COVID-19 and a full stop to elective surgeries, we see how vulnerable the healthcare system in the United States really is. While I don't recommend at all that you do surgery on yourself or your family members, in a worst case scenario where no medical professionals or facilities are available, this almost 700-page book can walk you through the life-saving medical procedures you need to know. From tracheotomies to tourniquets, from bullet wounds to high blood pressure, this book assumes you have little to no medical knowledge, and it walks you through the procedures you need to know when there's no help on the way. Hopefully, you'll never have to use anything in this book, but studying up on medical procedures now is a key skill to have. Should a medical crisis happen, you don't want to be unprepared, and having a book like this could literally mean the difference between life and death. Book 2, Atlases and Maps. Obviously, get a copy of a map of your local area. Even though the internet was designed so research institutes could communicate after a disaster or a nuclear attack, any technology is susceptible to failing during a natural disaster. After even the smallest of earthquakes here in California, often all the phone lines are busy as people call their friends and family to ask, "Did you feel it?" In a much larger earthquake or other natural disasters, it's not unreasonable to assume that these critical technology connections could fail. Having a hard copy, printed atlases, and maps could be a lifesaver if you're forced to evacuate your area, need to find your way back home, or need to find sources of water in a grid-down situation. I recommend having these materials both in your library and in the trunk of your vehicle. Book 3, Foraging. The Forager's Harvest, Nature's Garden, Edible Wild Plants. The pandemic revealed just how unreliable our food supply really is and how dependent and narrow our diets have become. When things initially hit, you saw how people rushed to stores, which caused them to get emptied out. Our heavy reliance upon the harvest of the three big grains, soy, wheat, and corn, and the animals that we eat are also fed with these grains as well. This leaves us dependent on a narrow food chain. Our ancestors, they were foragers. They knew the edible plants in their environment, and they harvested them and incorporated them into their diets. Dandelions, stinging nettles, gooseberries, nuts, mushrooms, and cactuses have many edible varieties. A good book on foraging that focuses heavily on your area or climate zone could be a lifesaver. You don't want to wait until a crisis hits to make a decision on whether a mushroom is the edible kind. So you should definitely read up on foraging and begin to identify safe plants to eat in your area so you'll know where they are should you ever need to eat them. You'll also find that you've probably been walking by a cornucopia of edible plants. You'll start to notice the abundance of food in parks and on nature walks. You never know. You may become curious enough to try your own hand at making dandelion wine or prickly pear syrup or some other seemingly exotic food. At the very least, put a good book on foraging in your prepping library. Book 4, Urban Emergency Survival Plan, Readiness Strategies for the City and Suburbs. Now for this one, I couldn't find a hard copy, but you can purchase it and download it. If you're new to prepping, you'll find that there are quite a few good books specific to surviving in the wilderness. And that's great, and I would recommend you have at least one of those books in your library. But on this channel, I like to focus on urban survival because 50% of Americans live in cities and in urban environments. This book, Urban Emergency Survival Plan, is a good starter for the person who wants to be prepared for the future, but may not have an acre of land to grow food on. There's some practical advice in this book for the person who needs to shelter in place at home or who needs to bug out in a hurry to a safer environment. Book 5, All New Square Foot Gardening, and also consider the Backyard Homestead. If you don't happen to own an acre of land, as many don't, including myself, you should still be aware of basic gardening techniques and maximizing what little space you do have. Now, if you do have enough space outdoors for some basic gardens, some garden beds, the All New Square Foot Gardening or the Backyard Homestead are books you want to add to your library and read them before you need them, as opposed to having to search through this book for the first time while surrounded by a crisis, which is never really a good idea. Now, we personally have been starting new garden beds at our home that we just moved to, and trust me when I say, it's something that takes time to learn. Start now while you can. So let's go ahead and jump into Book 6. Book 6 is the Prepper's Blueprint. Now, if you want an exhaustive sort of prepping for dummies, the Prepper's Blueprint is an excellent starting point. There's a lot of really good information here for anyone looking to get their head around preparedness and surviving disasters. This book even has a section on how to get ready for disasters that turn out to be much more longer lasting, such as an economic collapse, long-term power outages, and yes, even pandemics, to name a few. If you're now looking for a thorough overview of prepping, this is a good book to read, and you'll want it around as a reference guide should the current situation that we're in right now worsen or be compounded by other disasters or social instability. As you discover you want to know more about preparedness, I would further encourage you to explore any of the other books in the Process Self-Reliance series. It's a good little series with books ranging from canning to urban homesteading to what to do when there's no doctor to sustainable foods. There's a lot of opportunity for deeper exploration of many of the topics covered in the Prepper's Blueprint. So book number 7, The Prepper's Pocket Guide. In the same vein as the Prepper's Blueprint, but simpler to read and digest, is this book, The Prepper's Pocket Guide. I've been recommending this book for years to anyone who wants to begin lightly preparing. It has 101 easy things you can do to ready your home for disaster. Some of it might seem simple to anyone who has been prepping for a while, but for anyone relatively new to prepping, it will provide some good insight on practical things you can begin to do now to prepare yourself to survive an uncertain future. This book starts with the basics and it works its way up. Book 8, Meals in a Jar. Quick and easy, just add water, homemade recipes. When you were social distancing and quarantined to your house, you may have stared at your pantry or kitchen cabinets and wondered if you could mix ketchup and water to make tomato soup. If you weren't used to preparing your own meals prior to the pandemic, you definitely need to know how to cook. It's a skill that's essential to survival and the cornerstone of self-sufficiency. I like to print recipes from the internet and keep them in a file near my cookbooks, but you'll also want to make sure you have a book like this one, Meals in a Jar. Quick and easy, just add water, homemade recipes. Learning how to cook during a high-stress crisis situation is not really a good idea. So let's discuss book number 9, The Prepper's Home Defense Security Strategies to Protect Your Family by Any Means Necessary. Prepping is about knowing what you need to know before you need to know it. While I hope you're never in a violent situation where you have to defend yourself or your home, it's a good idea to have some knowledge of how to defend yourself. Now, this book is a thorough look at defending yourself and your home. It's very much written from the perspective that civilization has fallen and looters are coming, so you may find some of it a bit on the extreme side. However, I think having an awareness of the practical knowledge in this book would definitely help you if you ever find yourself in a truly bad situation. So book 10, any fiction book. If you found yourself going stir crazy while on lockdown, you recognize a need to be able to escape in a good book. You can't always rely on television or the internet to be your sole sources of entertainment. In deeper crisis, these sources may or may not be available to you. I suggest you at least have one or good two books of fiction in your library for those times when you're forced to wait out a crisis, like during this pandemic, or you're forced to shelter in place. You'll thank yourself for the ability to escape a bit should you have to keep stable in a crisis while things are raging outside and around you. Or another important option to consider is having self-improvement books. Personally, I'm taking the time during this pandemic to educate myself on investing. I've been reading a lot of Robert Kiyosaki's books and have been changing a lot of my views on finances. With everything happening right now, with many people laid off or furloughed, I hope people take advantage of this time to come out a better, more educated individual. By the way, this is probably one of my favorite books to start off with, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you want a good starting point to get your head wrapped around really how the wealthy think, I think this is a good book to kind of shift your mindset. I know for me personally it was. It's totally got me thinking in a different way on finances, and I'll probably talk about that in another video. So that's the 10 major books I would suggest minimally that you get in your prepper library. And like I said, there's links below for you to check them out further if you're interested in picking up any of these books. Now, if you're new to prepping because of the current pandemic, welcome, and hopefully these books will get you started in the right direction for the current crisis and any future crisis. If you've been prepping for a while, or if you've been a subscriber to this channel for a while, one of these books may be new to you, or you may want to lend your copy to one of these books to a concerned friend or family member who is now glad that you took prepping seriously. Now, I've done other videos on prepping books for your library, so you might want to take a look at those for an even more in-depth look, but I wanted to make this kind of a lighter 10-book video for anyone dipping their toes in the water for the first time. I hope you enjoyed this. If you found this information useful, please feel free to like and share it with your friends, family, and community. If you have any feedback or any other books that you would recommend, please post those in the comments section below. I always learn so much from the community, getting your insight. And again, if you're interested in checking out any of these books, I'll be posting links below. As always, stay safe out there.